Hello again, Steve here. This is a reply to a YouTube commenter, Dave Lordy, who we were back and forth for a bit on this, an issue that had come up in one of my videos, which was a comment I had made along the lines of debts upon the unborn. And first of all, Dave, because it's back and forth, it takes a while, sometimes I'd rather just chat about it. First of all, my videos are not intended to be completely accurate. I don't have like graphs up in the charts and so on. This is a continuation of something I've done many, many years ago and continue to do it once in a while. It's a live session. I get together with people and we just chat about ideas, sharing ideas on improving the quality of our lives. That's what coffee chat is. So it's a conversation. So yeah, there's going to be inaccuracies, and I appreciate the back and forth because it allows me to clarify what it is that I was intending to say. And my comment on, if we don't, if there's an obligation imposed upon us by the government or whatever, at that point, there's not really negotiations, or not necessarily negotiations, especially if there's a court order to collect. There will be, I use the term goons showing up at our doors with guns, and that's what, if you want to call it, you might want to call them police or bailiffs or whatever it is, but if it's armed men, basically, armed men and women showing up to collect something that we may not have expressly agreed upon. Now, in the comment back and forth between Dave and I, David asked me to point out an example of what I meant, because he wanted me to give him an example, I guess. So I just 30 seconds went on and just typed in, long-term government debts in Canada. And there are long-term bonds which are to expire in 2064, I believe, which are issued, billions of dollars worth of them. And 64, well, there's going to be people who are not yet born who are, well, like, who's going to pay for those? So billions of dollars of bonds are sold out into the market. And a bond is a debt obligation, which supposedly, if it doesn't get renewed at that point in time, the bond purchaser is going to come looking for their money, right? So the government's got to pay back $1 billion to whoever bought these bonds. Well, who pays for them? The idea is you either got to borrow more or issue more bonds, which then extends it further down the road, or you got to pay some of it off of the interest, let's say, by taxation. So there's an obligation. Yes, I agree. And I stated that in this back and forth, that there's no necessarily any contractual or moral duty upon these unborn who are to be born to pay that, which they have not agreed to. But who cares? I mean, that's democracy. That's the totalitarian nature of democracy. If a certain number of people have voted for a government to impose something, then it gets imposed on everybody, right? And it's an old socialist concept, the social contract. Socialists actually believe that there's some kind of a contract, but it never holds up in a contract court, of course. So can I explain that completely? Probably not. But the results are what they are. The results are what they are. If somebody creates a business just because they wanted to create a business, sooner or later, and if they don't fill out any paperwork and get the VAT taxes registered or GST registered or whatever, sooner or later, somebody's going to come knocking on that door. Like, you got to have a permit for this and a permit for that and a license fee for this. And, they will assess the value of your property eventually, and they will come down. And I've got personal experience with this. I had goons threaten to bulldoze down my house. And for not complying to their arbitrary whims, that's what I'm going to call these laws. And I call them arbitrary whims because they're not something natural. They're not law. Law is gravity, right? Law is immutable. That's what, if you look up the origins of the word law, it means it's basically it's something that's completely consistent. But so-called laws that are drawn up, they're not consistent because they can be made one day and erased the next. That's not law. That's arbitrary whim. Sure, it could be a large group of people making the arbitrary whim, but it's arbitrary, no question about it. So the question that often happens sometimes when, because sometimes I do get the sense that people are trolling me, which is fine. Like, that's perfectly fine. I appreciate that that energy and that sort of grind upon me once in a while. It's actually good. No, but I think so. When there's something, I mean, the thing is, when we're talking within a sphere, right? Like, I talk a lot of times within the freedom movement. That's who I assume I'm talking to people who have a basic understanding, and I could be wrong. Like, my assumptions could be completely wrong, because somebody might just join the conversation later on and not understand what the premise of the conversation is. But there's certain basic ideas. Like, for example, if a bunch of physicists or a bunch of chemists are talking in the lab, and one of them says something about sodium chloride or whatever, or uses makes a statement that he assumes everybody already understands. Well, if he assumes that, he doesn't have to go into a great explanation as to the formula and the chemical makeup of what happens when you put this and that together and so on, because he understands that they're moving on from there, from that basic premise, right? And when I talk about debts upon the unborn, if I'm talking to a bunch of freedom ANCAPs or whatever, whoever might be listening to this, I don't really have to explain how that actually works. So if I get the sense that maybe somebody, because I have had legitimate trolls on my on Facebook and on YouTube and so on before, and so I know that that's possible. So if you weren't legitimately trolling, I'm sorry for that comment then, Dave. But I mean, that's what I just assume that people are understanding that, if as an example, if a long-term bond is issued for 75 or 60 years or whatever by the government, that automatically means, I don't have to explain that there's going to be people who are paying taxes, and some of their taxes going towards the payment of that, the interest on that debt or whatever, who are yet to be born, right? I mean, I don't know how to explain that in terms of any simpler terms. And it doesn't matter to the government whether they expressly agreed or not, because the government exists in this aggressive monopolization of the use of force that nobody else can do. So it's like a separate godly institution that can do things that other people can't do. So whereas in typical commerce, typical interactions, for a contract to be upheld, there must be an explicit agreement. There must be certain things in place, full agreement, full understanding on both sides, even in marriage, right? Because you can have an element of marriage where somebody didn't completely understand the contract and so on. But there doesn't seem to be as much of that with government, because government can just come along, and the way it works is you have this democracy, right? And if a greater number of people vote for something, then the government proceeds with what they call a mandate to create all these so-called laws, which then they say apply to everybody, even those who have nothing to do. It didn't vote for them, or they come along, and if you created a business and you've even if you haven't earned fiat currency, even if you just earned compensation in kind or whatever, bitcoins, for example, they will assess that and come after you for the taxes. And if you ignore it, there'll be a court order. This is how it works. A court order, and then people will show up to fill that court order. And they will have guns. The reason they say they have guns is for their own protection, right? For their own protection. Sir, why do you have a gun? Oh, it's for my protection. Okay, how about I go in and put my gun on then for my protection? Let's see how you're going to like it. No, it's not for your protection. It's for intimidating other people, and if necessary, shooting them. Right? These are the things I don't have to explain to people who are already in the conversation of freedom. But if you're not, then it might sound really, really strange, and it might sound that, oh, you're just angry or something, Steve. But no, it's just what it is. So it's the premise, the sort of thing where I'm coming from, at least part of it. The other thing is that comes up, and this has come up numerous times with conversations like this is, at a certain point, somebody will say, well, Steve, if you don't like it the way it is where you're at, why don't you just leave? Well, first of all, I was born here, all right? I don't have to leave. If somebody wants to impose something upon me and they don't like the way I'm doing, they better throw my ass out. I'm not obliged to leave. It's like if you're in your house and somebody starts coming in and making a bunch of rules and they're trying to guilt you into you not following my rules, you can say, hang on a second here, this is my fucking house. Who the hell are you, right? I was born in this land that I live in, right? I don't have to leave, right? And I don't have to follow its rules, but if I don't, there are the consequences. And I've been subject to them. Yes, I've had my ass hauled into court. And, but I didn't agree. I've never seen, and I've asked, show me where I've signed to agree to this. No. It's just diversion, diversion, diversion. That's the way the system works. So when people ask me, okay, Steve, what is the solution to this? Okay, you're saying that this is wrong. This is where we can improve from this. What is the solution? My answer is, I don't know. I don't know. Because I'm not looking at it from a practical standpoint. Although I do give examples, like the example of the Toastmasters Club, which has, a government, it has a president, we have a constitution, we have treasurer and the whole works. But we don't go around with guns imposing things on people because we have express agreement where people have signed to a contract to abide by those rules and regulations that we have. So there are examples, micro examples of where it actually works. But mostly where I'm coming at it is from a moral standpoint, right? It's wrong for me to impose my will upon others. Therefore, I'm going to universalize that. If it's immoral, it has to be universal. I'm going to say, well, if it's wrong for me, then it's wrong for everybody. Either that, then if it's wrong for some people, not wrong for others, it's not universal, not a principle at that point. It's just some sort of a arbitrary convenience. It's convenient for this person to do that, and it's not convenient for that person to do that. If it's actually a principle, then it's universal. Like in the scientific lab, you don't have a principle that says, okay, it applies here, but it doesn't apply here. Then it's not a principle. It might be an observation, a momentary error in calculations or something, but it's not a principle. So mine is, the way I approach it is, whether it's possible or not is not really the point. Whether it's practical or not is not really the point. It's wrong for me to impose my will upon others. And if I'm going to create a debt obligation, which I'm going to say, oh, people who are not yet born 60 years later, they can pay for it. No, I don't have that right. I don't have that moral right to say that somebody else is going to pay for what I'm using. No, it's not. It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So anyways, I just wanted to reply, to make a few comments here, Dave. I appreciate the comments and the back and forth. And yeah, if there's something else that comes up, maybe I'll make another video. Steve here again, great chatting. Talk again soon. If you like what I'm doing, please like, subscribe, and share. And please keep the comments coming. Talk again soon. Bye for now.